The girl becomes the protagonist of a romance novel due to her very different behavior and attitudes compared to before. Her father believes that the girl has been heartbroken by the crown prince, so he arranges for the best man to get involved with his daughter. However, the girl only wants to be a person who lives off-air at home. The girl from her past life always lived repressed, in a place full of traps, in an environment of deceit, like walking on thin ice. That's why she dreams of being a wicked villain, even enduring the insults and criticisms of others, but she can never change the reality of having been born with a silver spoon. Finally, one day she was chosen by a reincarnation truck, and upon opening her eyes, she became the villainess she had always desired. With a frown, there is a maid who consoles her. Upon waking up, there is an abundant breakfast. The girl simply cannot believe that her dream has come true like this, and that her original voice is also that of a villainess. In the original work, after the protagonist and the heroine get engaged, he signs a contract with a demon and becomes dark due to his extraordinary magical talent. He once became the most feared enemy of the protagonists, but she does not wish to lead her life towards a tragic end. Her family is an ancient family of mages. Her father is the most powerful of the Empire's magic masters. She is also part of the Ascensor's family, and her family owns countless gems. With her impressive figure, her beauty, and her exceptional magical talent, no man is needed. She only needs to lie in bed and dream of the perfect life of the future. She only needs to applaud the sweet love of the two protagonists from afar, and stay away from them so as not to become a dark mage. At this moment, the young actress reminds the Duke that he has arrived. Frightened, Given got up in a hurry. Dad had a serious expression. He reprimanded Given for not having reflected properly. It turns out that before crossing over, her real body launched a bomb at the protagonist's meeting place. That's why the Duke ordered her to stay home, reflecting for a week. Although it's called Confinement, a book that only stays in the room eating, drinking, and having fun, she couldn't help but doubt. Does Dad think I'm lazy and like to enjoy life without doing anything? I am reflecting in silence, but Dad doesn't believe it at all. His own daughter is reflecting in silence. He quickly called the assistant and asked him to hand over those matters to a book for him to handle. Seeing that the assistant tries to convince the Duke not to be so severe with his daughter, one cannot help but doubt if he has time traveled. There are also overtime hours to do. Upon learning that he only works 6 hours a day, one feels relieved. Before leaving, Dad Layson demands that the work be completed well, otherwise he will be expelled from the family. Not only her father, but her brother also despises her greatly daily. Although it seems her family doesn't like her. For an orphan from his past life, having a family gives him some joy. Fortunately, they haven't kicked her out of the house. When the Duke received the finished matter from his daughter, he almost fell over from fright. A book that records in a tabular manner allows the company's sales volume to be visually known. Even the Duke showed an expression of satisfaction. The assistant beside him began to praise him effusively, saying that he has always been very intelligent since childhood. The Duke suddenly realized something, so he called his son-in-law, his daughter's husband. When the Duke asked about the young lady's condition, the maid immediately began to explain in a panic. The young lady has been very depressed lately. She only eats 3 meals a day, and in her free time, she has been helping to organize the office desk. The Duke became increasingly alarmed upon hearing this. Normally, his daughter never helps with work, and besides, this child has always eaten 6 times a day since she was little. Then the noble immediately searched his mind for the reason for his daughter's change. It must be that the crown prince rejected her, which caused serious damage to her pride. He couldn't help but doubt if his daughter was still in love with the crown prince, not knowing that at that moment the crown prince was eating fruit in his room, eating dessert after the fruit, then lying down to sleep comfortably. But the Duke is already completely resentful in his heart, hating the emperor. The prince's daughter, beautiful and of noble lineage, pursues him so fervently, and he still has the audacity to go out with the bastard princess from another country. Angry, he slammed the table. He felt like his daughter was throwing bombs at him, as if she was doing him a favor. The one who had been called by her father hurried to ask what had happened. She couldn't help but worry. She wondered if there was a problem with what she had written. She apologized to her father, saying that she had already done her best. Hearing his daughter's apology, the Duke suspected he had misheard. He quickly praised that the book was very well done. Upon learning that she was not being harassed, Finally, her heart in suspense relaxed, and she showed a bright smile. But the Duke, her father, was very nervous because his daughter in the past never paid attention to his praise, and besides, she often gets into trouble. To become an eternal recluse, Given hurried to say that she would always reflect in her room. She hadn't finished speaking when the Duke interrupted her. Dad only wants you to reflect a little. He doesn't want you to get discouraged. Telling her that he had bought an empty house, he dispatched his assistant to explain. The Duke has already placed a sealed spell around the house, which will not affect others. But for her at this moment, she doesn't dare to destroy a house without reason. She noticed that her father showed an expression of certainty. She subtly admitted that she deserved to be punished, so it is not necessary to destroy the house. But such behavior completely enraged the Duke. He was already convinced that it was the Crown Prince who had turned his daughter's head. Fortunately, the assistant beside him stopped the Duke in time, and besides, his daughter showed great admiration for the Duke's powerful magic, which made Dad Duke feel a little embarrassed. At that moment, the Duke told his daughter that she could say whatever she wanted. "If you want to fall in love, I will give it to you. I will find a man who is 100 times better than that dog prince." However, she said she wanted to study. This left everyone present speechless, so the Duke prepared many books for her. She returned to the room with a book, and while reading, she ate a snack. This life of being at home made her feel incredible. Then she began to dream that she could use magic like her dad, but she didn't understand anything of the magical knowledge in the books, so she began her practical training. Full of confidence, she gestured to release magic. She was about to recite a spell when suddenly someone opened the door without warning. The other person was the brother called Mad Dog in the original work, Baden. She nervously asked what her brother was doing there. It turns out his brother had come in to organize tables and study the courses. This behavior made the older brother think he wanted to compete for the title. Seeing that they had misunderstood him, he clenched his fist angrily, explaining that he only wanted to help his brother protect the family. Bodden never thought Ivan would help him. Then Ivan gave an example. The intervals between monster wars were shortening. Before, it was a war every 10 years, now it's every 5 years. The next one will be every 3 years, and even the scale will be larger. Although the brother knows this, he still wants to ask where that information comes from. Unfortunately, it can only be from use, what one has learned from history. As a result, seeing those serious data tables, the brother finally accepted this statement reluctantly, but he still doesn't believe that his sister will really help him. To follow his words, to dispel his brother's doubts, she was forced to act out a tragedy. "I only wanted to help my brother and my father live in peace." While the confused brother asks what song, a little impatient and annoyed, he called his brother again. Now the brother was also convinced that his sister was crazy, so he quickly went to look for his father to ask about his sister's situation. Hearing this, the Duke suddenly stood up. "You also think Given is very strange? After all, the two of you have never been called brother or received praise. Besides, Given's madness for knowledge has made the teachers tremble." Then, after a discussion between father and son, they attributed the reason for Given's change completely to the Crown Prince. The Duke decided to introduce his daughter to a candidate for marriage, thinking that perhaps going out with a man who is 100 times more handsome than the Crown Prince would make his daughter feel much better. They both recalled past dating experiences and began to laugh sinisterly. And at that moment, a handsome man received an invitation to go to the capital. An ancient contract was also included in the mirror. This is from the past. Alice's father established it due to a debt of gratitude he had incurred, a contract that promised to fulfill anything. Therefore, despite the officer trying to dissuade Alice from going out with the infamous Villainess, Alice still insisted on going on the date. He also wanted to see how terrible the Villainess really was. Afterwards, Ivan went shopping with Ivan. Wherever Ivan went, people avoided Ivan. This makes Given even more afraid to go out. Her brother, beside her, mocks Given's well-known reputation. After getting off the carriage, Given is curious about the bustling commercial street, but her brother thinks that Given is like this because he hasn't gone out for a long time. Clearly, this is what it is. Some time ago, at the place where they threw bombs, he said. The young man approached one's ear, asking if one still wanted to throw bombs. At that moment, one's gaze drifted towards the splendid palace not far away. Quickly, a piece of cloth covered his sight. Dad had a tense expression that made one feel, "Don't look at that place." Even the brother said, This is too romantic. At that moment, Even realized they both misunderstood that she was still in love with the prince, but Even's explanation to them seemed more like a facade of indifference after being rejected. To improve Even's mood after being rejected, her father took her to a clothing store to buy clothes. The waiter's attitude is completely different from what I remember. When I come alone, they always talk about me. Perhaps to everyone, I am someone who doesn't fit in. However, I don't feel sad for a second. Dad and my brother call me to come quickly. She immediately ordered the saleswoman to take out all the clothes that fit her well. This made her feel relieved, and she smiled. She didn't care how others saw her. As long as her family cared about her, it was fine. Then she tried on a lot of clothes, but every garment she put on shone with splendor on her. This makes it impossible to choose one book. Both the father and the brother can't help but sigh. One book is the most beautiful child in the empire. Then the father points to some red high-heeled shoes and asks the saleswoman to pack everything else except those dangerous shoes and take them away. After finishing shopping at the clothing store, the father and the brother went to a store they often visited. Seeing that the father had found something, he said it looked very good on her, and the brother asked her to try this and that. She unintentionally let out a laugh. This warm scene was something she had never experienced in her past life, and the father and the brother noticed Y's smile and quickly approached her like puppies. The father told Y that smile was very much like Mom's. Dad's words filled I's heart at that moment. The brother, not understanding, proposed going for tea. The two spoke in a playful tone, making one doubt that this was planned in advance. All right, we've arrived at the cafe. The father ordered a lot of desserts. This left her a little helpless. Now she only wants to return to her room to study, and besides, she bought so many clothes, she didn't have a chance to wear them. The angry father slammed the table and said, "There will be opportunities. 3 days later, I will introduce you to a good man, and the meeting place will be in this cafe." She remembered what her father had said before. It turns out he was serious. Before Joan could complain, her brother began to introduce the person she was going to date. The other person is the head of Duke Owl's family. He is also a master swordsman. I've heard of this person. He is said to be the object of admiration of all the young ladies, but can't help but wonder why such an exceptional person would want to meet such a crazy woman with such a bad reputation. Hearing this, her father stood up angrily, wanting to teach a good lesson to whoever spoke behind his back. The brother also comforts Jivan, who has good qualities. She sees that the two are trying hard to comfort themselves. Moved, Jivan is speechless. Afterwards, Dad and the brother have things to do and leave. Before, Here, who had just been moved by Dad and the brother, immediately becomes discouraged upon seeing the blonde-haired boy. The other yawns and moves lazily. His attitude is completely different from when he was with his father. So she got angry, wanting to teach him a lesson for his bad intentions. She said there was a bug on the other's arm and then slapped him on the arm. He didn't expect that with just that, the other would sit on the ground in pain. She opened her hand and looked. She hadn't foreseen it either. Her own hands have such power. Suddenly, she was surprised. She realized that her shadow had at some point turned into a strange, moving purple substance. Even her brother only went to confront the Crown Prince. However, what he didn't expect was that the Crown Prince heard about the capital of Airsland. He had already guessed that the other's purpose in this trip was for a brother he didn't know how to explain, so he brought the Crown Prince to his side and arrogantly began to criticize a book that had entered about the reasons for excelling in studies. He proudly believed he was doing it to become the Crown Princess. Then, with an air of regret, he expressed that the position of princess consort belonged to that princess. The furious brother became enraged, but still reminded the prince not to worry about it. Jabai had already started a new life. And the Crown Prince thought his brother was just showing off. He never imagined that one day Jabai wouldn't like him. Let the brother advise one to give up. That attitude of narcissism and arrogance would make the brother wish to become a mad dog and tear him apart. Suddenly, the brother noticed a residual footprint on the tree beside him. So he took out a magic object, wanting to record it. But when he warned the prince about the unusual thing behind him, the projection on the tree suddenly disappeared. At that moment, the Crown Prince kept insisting that his brother convince him. Finally, his brother's expression darkened. He told the prince not to worry. He had already forgotten the prince. Besides, his father and he himself did not wish for him to become the Crown Princess. He finished without giving the Crown Prince the opportunity to react, and bowed to say goodbye. Although his brother deep down didn't really know if there was still a Prince Aoki or not, He decided that his sister would have no more opportunities to get close to that despicable man. A short time ago, one book discovers that its shadow has become a strange purple substance. Scared, she suddenly steps on the shadow. However, she hears the other also making threats, so the book hits hard again. That made the shadow return to normal, but when the book asks the blonde about what just happened, he says he didn't see anything. And after repelling the monsters, an injured person appeared in the palace and left his footprint on a tree. Beside a mark was left. She gave the maid some lace, which made the maid jump for joy, and after saying thank you 300 times, she began to sing and dance. She began to review documents looking for information related to diffuse shadows. Thinking that someone wanted to harm him, he felt a little melancholic, but she reviewed all the books and found no clues. Then she thought that perhaps her original voice might have some clues. She casually asked the maid if she remembered her ordering that some places not be touched. As expected, upon hearing this, the maid immediately became nervous and assured her that she had not touched anything. The court lady's projectile manufacturing workshop, that is, the artificial products laboratory, the storage cabinet to the right of the table. Knowing the location, a slight smile warns the maid not to let anyone touch that thing. The maid, upon receiving the order, says she will follow the young lady's instructions and that upon detecting an intruder, she will use this ear bomb to counterattack. One observes her with an innocent expression. I can't help but feel she's really a maid. At midnight, a maid stealthily arrived at the projectile laboratory. She discovered that the construction inside was completely different from what she had imagined. Everywhere there were orderly test tubes and magic potions. When she found the maid's table, she discovered a hidden diary in the drawer and a book. Then, she prepared to see what was written in the diary, but she couldn't open it with her brute force. With no options, she could only turn her attention to the other book. When she skimmed the contents of the book, she was surprised to discover this is a book about the zombie disease of magical memory. This means that the book has contracted this disease and is looking for a way to cure itself. At the same time, she also discovers, through the contents of the book, that the reason why she couldn't use her magic was because of this disease. Fortunately, one book discovers the key to treating this disease. It is perseverance, citing a powder made from a high-level magic stone. However, the price of this magic stone is exorbitant. Just 1 kilogram costs 10 billion gold coins. The next day was the day of one book's date with Aze. Aze had prepared early to go out. An elegant and upright figure made even the terrifying ones emotional to tears. Meanwhile, the other Jivan seemed worried. She asked the maid about her assets clearly, but she told her that all the young lady's assets had been used in the Magic Guild. This also means that Jivan doesn't have many assets. After Given realized he was a poor devil, she felt increasingly nervous about the threat to his life. What would happen if they found out she didn't know magic? So she asked the maid for a magical communication device. After communicating with the people in the Jewelers Guild, she learned that the price of magic stones is 20 million elves each, and most of them are only of nominal value. Discouraged, she arrived at the meeting place, still thinking about selling his clothes to get money. Even the opinions of others were indifferent to him until Alsa's voice reminded him. Then she realized she was on a blind date. Although the other person was a man of exceptional beauty, he also wanted to propose meeting again next time. But the other person was surely deceived by her father. So perhaps ending the date quickly would be best for both of them. So one book decided to take action to scare Eris. She raised her hands and smiled radiantly, asking if the other person would be willing to lend him some money. Thinking that her behavior would surely leave the other person speechless, and then he would leave angrily. But she heard the other person ask her how much she needed. In a moment of panic, she said she urgently needed 20 billion coins. She immediately saw AI take something out of his lining. Seeing that the other person took out a pen, she reacted instinctively, thinking that the fencing master was going to use this to silence her, but AI was just writing quickly on the paper. At that moment, she noticed that AI's eyelashes were very beautiful, and his hair also looked especially soft. Seeing such a handsome face, she couldn't help but relax. Soon she noticed again that the other person's fingers were also slender and beautiful. Following his gaze, she realized that the other person was drawing furiously on the check. Realizing AI was serious, he hurried to get closer to try and stop him, but unintentionally, he grabbed the other person's hand tightly. This scene left both paralyzed for a moment. She quickly shook her hands, then apologized. Although she had already heard that the Duke was very kind, he shouldn't be like this, he shouldn't lend money so easily. However, the Duke smiled and explained that he wasn't a high society girl. The young lady was a servant of the Ascent family, and that money was private property. Even if he was deceived in the end, there was nothing that could be done. A little reminder for the person I'm on a date with, it's a bit strange. The first reaction should be to run away, right? Alishan put down his teacup, then fixed his eyes on the little one, approached, and whispered to the little one. The court lady shouldn't be a strange person, right? The gazes of both crossed briefly. One, shy and nervous, stood up to say goodbye, and the Duke also kindly proposed to accompany her home. He expressed that he wanted to get to know her better. Although she also wanted to accept, she feared that her bad woman identity would cause trouble for the Duke. One rejected the Duke's kindness. This is what the Duke asked of one book, to fulfill one of his requests. The next time they meet, they will call each other by their names, saying while taking one book's hand, "The court lady calls me Letna," and Jin then gently kissed one book's guard. At that moment, Given felt like the heart sealed for 2 lifetimes was finally beginning to beat. Her sincere smile responded to the Duke's request. "Okay, Lord Ledane," left the Duke stunned. After the date, Given arrived at the nearby square. The time spent with the Duke was very short and very happy, but the Duke is someone he cannot reach. I won't see him again. At that moment, he saw someone approaching by their golden hair. Surely that's a maid of the Crown Prince. Oh dear, it's my niece. On the day of the blind date, she still has to come and see me. This is the book of the person I least want to meet. The Prince. The Crown Prince was adopted by the current Empress, and that's why he became the Crown Prince. Therefore, he cares a lot about his image and the dignity of royalty. This has also led him to especially hate a notoriously famous book. Even a silver gesture similar to a purple book, he never wears it. But now this prince is before one book, showing off like a cowboy. When one book bows to the prince, he carefully observes the other. In the novel, the prince is a handsome man, but one book has just met a more perfect man. Instead, he feels that the Crown Prince is too common, and a careful observation of Jivan in the prince's eyes became a pleading look. "Then I'm bothering you. I'll leave first." The Crown Prince doesn't understand now how it's possible that he can't attract Jivan. She sees that Given really says goodbye and leaves. In a moment of urgency, he grabbed Given's hand, so as not to let him go. This rude act surprised Given. "Your Highness, you are now grabbing my hand." The Crown Prince then released his hand. Given saw that the crowd was watching more and more, thinking that if he revealed the truth in public, the Crown Prince would understand his intention. So she told the Crown Prince that she had already forgotten the prince, and that in the future he would not bother him at all. At the same time, he apologized to the Crown Prince for his past behavior, but this man with greasy hair seemed not to understand. He kept talking in front of everyone. One book's effort to enter is to become the consort of the Crown Prince, and then there is one book in front of this shameless butter. It also looks bad. Hearing that the other party also involved Duke Ailes, Jivan became so angry that he began to tremble. At that moment, the Duke arrived in time to save the situation. He carefully helped Jivan put on his coat, then immediately cast a cold gaze towards the Crown Prince. Upon learning that the other person was Duke Ares, the prince's face instantly turned gloomy. When the situation of the three formed a stable triangular structure, the people around immediately began to murmur about the young man. Someone even said that the Duke and the Crown Prince are the true love of the Villainess, and one book is only 1/3. Let one book enjoy in silence. The bombs begin to explode nonstop. He seems to realize the book is in a bad mood. The Duke gestures to take the book to a quiet place, assuring her, "I just prepared a gift. I forgot to give it to you." One guessed that the other person intentionally wanted to help her, so she had a brilliant idea. She grabbed the Duke's arm intimately, telling the Crown Prince, who is still on a date with the Duke, to have a good time with him and that he would withdraw first. However, the Duke also did not expose her. Instead, he took Given's hand to confirm his relationship with Given, just as he said. The Crown Prince frowned as he watched the two people walking away hand in hand, not knowing why he felt a defeat that he, so proud, could not accept. And at that moment, Jivan thanked the Duke. "In the future, I will find a way to return the favor." She knows that the Duke is only fulfilling his father's request, She came to meet him because of that. But because of her, everything has become complicated. Duke Dwayne fell into reflection. She thought that she had bothered him, but to her surprise, the Duke moved forward quickly. In an instant, a mature and serene face approached her, giving those large and tender hands. Gently stroking her hair, the girl closed her eyes tightly, filled with expectation and fear. Then the Duke gently removed a leaf from her hair. Then he asked what Duffy had mentioned. He hadn't remembered to call her by her name, but one at this moment was still immersed in the Duke's action. Seeing the other still with a serene and calm expression, one thought it was strange. Such behavior could lead to misunderstandings. And upon returning home, the Duke couldn't calm down at all. Without realizing it, he put a lot of milk in his coffee, with the head full of glimpses of one book. He even ignored the words of the officer beside him, overlooking them directly. Suddenly, the Duke asked the officer if he had said he was very handsome before the date. The officer, not understanding, said he was handsome now too, and would be in the future as well. This answer did not satisfy the Duke. How can I trust your aesthetic sense? That's not anyone's taste. Then he actively mentioned that in the dating process, he took great care of himself. The officer wanted to say that the Duke was wrong, but was interrupted directly. Then the Duke told the officer, "There are always strange voices in my head. I don't know why I can hear a book that bears my name. That confuses me a lot." The officer simply laughed, asking if the gift from the Duke this morning had been delivered. The Duke then suddenly remembered that at that moment he was chasing after a lady-in-waiting to deliver a gift. She unexpectedly encountered one book crying in front of the prince, apologizing to herself for what had happened. In an instant, he imagined a court lady meeting the prince, whom she had admired for a long time. Due to her intense pain, she asked her unsympathetic self to help her escape the place. So he told his officer that he would not return to the territory for the time being, and ordered him to investigate if the maids had recently accumulated large debts. He wanted to know about the Ascent family. As the wealthiest family in the empire, one book, but what is the reason she needs so much money? The Duke looks out the window, thinking about the maid's jewels. His pupils are like the sunset. He suddenly regrets not having prepared a more valuable gift, not knowing that the magic stone ring he gave is exactly what is needed. Seeing the magic stone at this moment, one feels moved to tears. She can't help but exclaim, "The Duke is the most perfect man in the world. Even the gift he prepared is exactly what I need." Suddenly, her father and brother burst into her room. The reason is that they heard that the emperor, the prince, appeared at one's date. But one was more worried about her father and brother. Recently, the two have been very busy with work. They have always had that exhausted expression. One's concern makes the two feel more guilty. Clearly, one has been suffering outside and still worries about them. The father apologizes. "He shouldn't have let my daughter go on the date. The daughter of the damage met the prince." She comforts her dad, saying that it's okay. She only feels that the Duke has been treated unfairly, making him meet someone like her. These words are unacceptable to her dad and brother. In their eyes, she is the most exceptional and kind child in the house. She smiles calmly, then asked her father that she wanted to forget everything and start over with her career. Both her father and brother agreed. Instead of wasting time on relationships, it would be better to invest it. However, he directly said that he had no money to start a business. She asked her father if he could lend him 10 million coins. He would return the principal plus interest in the future. The brother feels that this is the money for several garments, so he plans to give it directly to his sister, but she flatly refuses. She will formally ask for a loan with a promissory note, all to increase the confidence that his father and brother have in him. The father realizes that his daughter is serious this time, so he agreed. His family is not only a family of mages, but also the owner of an investment group. Taking this opportunity for his daughter to learn how to do business, at night the father called his brother and told him that in one book, besides doing business, nothing about dating was mentioned. This surprised his brother very much. He carefully reminded his father, "A person's heart doesn't change so easily. Perhaps she is only pretending. She has kept her unrequited love for the prince." Hearing this, his father's face turned cold again. Only because the queen adopted him did Adrian become the crown prince. This position can change at any time. If he falls from his position as crown prince, he will no longer be able to ignore our family. The brother clearly didn't expect it either. The father, for one book, will intervene in the dispute for the royal heir. After all, since ancient times, the Ascent family has never interfered in royalty. The father explains that this is only part of the reason. The main reason is still the princess brought by the crown prince. She is too strange. The brother also noticed on the battlefield the magic used by the princess. Her healing ability far exceeds the normal level. Then the father ordered the brother to investigate the princess. At the same time, contact Alexia, the current third prince's woman, and also invite the girl on a date. But when she saw the letter the maid handed her, she didn't feel happy at all. Even in an instant, his face turned pale and cold sweat broke out on his forehead because she was the most infamous villain in the empire. She suspected the Duke surely feels it's too unfair to himself, so he decided to sue himself, and the prince sent her the sins she had committed in the past, a letter of responsibility. The maid comforts her, saying that although she was a bit excessive in the past, Miss Yendi is now even kinder than the nuns in the convent. After a moment of calm, she decided to first observe the Duke's behavior, thinking that the Duke, at most, would only ask me to return the engagement ring because that day the Duke was quite kind to me. So, with a restless heart, she opened the envelope and began to read. She didn't expect that the Duke's letter only expressed concern about whether she would like the gift, and at the end, he invited her to go to the opera together. The maid calls the Duke. He must be completely fascinated by the young lady, urging her to reply and accept quickly, but she prepares to refuse. She is convinced that the Duke is doing it at his father's request, so out of courtesy he writes to her, although she really didn't want to give up this perfect man. And the Crown Prince's new book, she only quickly reviewed. The other party even invited him to a tea party organized by the princess, and even specially warned him that he could not use magic when coming. This kind of behavior is simply treating her like a potential criminal. Besides, she already told him that she is not interested in the Crown Princess, yet he continues to bother her. In her heart, she considers him the most trash, a loser. The day of the tea party arrived. The Crown Prince looked around at the noble ladies present, but failed to find one in particular. At that moment, he felt very discouraged. Clearly, in the past, whenever he was present at court, the women did everything possible to approach him. He remembered the day Duke Elsie took one in particular away. He couldn't help but doubt, does one book really not seek to capture his attention? A woman beside him took the Crown Prince's arm. The other person was Princess Cordelia of the neighboring kingdom of Malaysia. The Crown Prince introduced everyone. The princess trusts in recovery. Magic saved her life. Everyone instantly became the princess's lapdogs and began to flatter him. At that moment, someone mentioned the Duke and the Villainess in the matter of the date, about the date, and the princess also noticed. The Crown Prince's expression instantly turned unpleasant, so he began to praise the good skincare of the other girls, managing to divert everyone's attention. Meanwhile, she went to buy rhodiola herb. This is a new project he has been thinking about. The main function of this herb is to act as an antipyretic. Although there are materials on the market that are more effective, rhodiola herb is very economical. A monopoly can be achieved with limited funds. And he also discovered in the original work its other function. Among the future nobility, a skin disease of unknown origin will spread, and the princess, the illegitimate princess, managed to reverse her unfavorable situation thanks to this herb. The princess of that time, although rhodiola herb was distributed for free, she has no intention of doing the same. She is prepared to take full advantage of the information he obtained from the novel to earn 20 billion energy. At the same time, to sell at a higher price, she plans to package rhodiola herb as a more luxurious and curative product for skin diseases, handmade and natural. After the cosmetics were unloaded from the carriage, she unintentionally glanced towards the palace, thinking that the Crown Prince was organizing a flower tea party. It made him a little angry. She was just preparing to take care of his affairs, but the wind blew dust into her eyes, and he looked so pitiful, with her eyes full of tears. She was seen in full by the Duke. The man is the dream lover of all the women in the empire. When he goes out, he can attract the attention of countless women. Even an 80-year-old man cannot help but admire his beauty. However, such a perfect man is hopelessly in love with the most infamous woman. The two looked into each other's eyes for a moment, and the Duke couldn't contain his inner joy. Although the recent invitation was rejected by a maid, this chance encounter really made him very happy. Like a mischievous child caught cheating, she felt a chill and told the Duke that she still had some things to attend to here. She wanted to take the opportunity to escape, but he also said that he had matters to attend to on this street and hoped to go with Jivan. This surprised Jivan a little. The invitation in the second letter was from his father, so what about this invitation from the Duke? Given suddenly felt alert towards the Duke, because in the original work, Duke Al is only mentioned briefly and never actually appears. This means that the current plot deviates greatly from the original, but this novel especially likes to make twists, for example, that his own assistant betrays him. So one book lifted its hair, acting as if it was impatient, hoping that the Duke could go for a walk with someone else. But just as it finished speaking, the Duke turned into a sad puppy and quickly approached its side. This is just an excuse I found to be with you. You can't pretend you don't know and accept it. Vinian's heart almost exploded. Even the blonde guard was surprised by the Duke's behavior, complaining that the lady-in-waiting is really very cruel. Afterwards, the Duke went shopping with Jivan and let the blonde boy play on his own. Jivan hadn't even had time to worry about not having an escort in case he might be attacked when she heard the Duke ask the reason for the lack of an escort. Then Jivan realized that according to what was established, he was a great mage. Not needing an escort is natural. Be careful with an unnatural explanation. Anyway, there's no harm. The Duke of the Ancient Tongue felt, after all, there's too much trash in this world. Hearing trash, one thought they were referring to him. Nervously, she changed the subject, saying he was going shopping. Afterwards, the Duke felt, so it turns out he likes to go shopping. He remembered it. Suddenly he felt like he was being interrogated. Past actions appeared in his mind. He defended himself unconsciously. I don't spend as much as before now. I even dislike luxury goods a little. But the Duke began to panic again. So you don't like jewelry, dresses, shoes, and bags? He sighed disappointedly. I should learn more about what maids give as gifts. She suddenly remembered the model bracelet that the Duke had given him. It turns out that the Duke misunderstood that she didn't like the dating gifts he gave her. She couldn't help but smile, then told the Duke that she really liked the gift he had sent, because after all, it was a magic stone that could cure the loss of magical memory during the process. The Duke kept asking one, as if wanting to clarify his own situation, still ambiguously praising in the drawing. One book is more beautiful than before. One book, barely managing to suppress the inner turmoil, was about to respond and praise the Duke when she was interrupted by other nobles passing by. Seeing Duke Al's, their faces filled with smiles, and they did everything possible to introduce their daughters to the Duke, but the Duke only greeted them politely and quickly said goodbye. The Duke's cold behavior was strange. She thought the Duke was especially kind to everyone. She didn't expect the Duke to suddenly apologize. I had too many questions, but I'm only curious about you. This made her also have to speculate. Does the Duke really have special feelings for me? Looking at that confident and handsome face, suddenly realized that her so infamous role shouldn't have this kind of sweet plot. Normally, passers-by are ashamed to see one book. Waiters can also speak ill of her without hesitation. This time, the Duke is accompanying her, but he has been trying to get closer to her, and always asks personal questions, saying ambiguous things that only interest him. So, in my naivete, I thought he was pretending out of love. In reality, the Duke has other reasons for approaching me. However, he doesn't realize that the Duke is just an incurable romantic. She cast an unnatural glance at the man beside him. The other person emanated a force he couldn't reject. She supposed that the Duke was a member of a secret royal organization, an elite tasked with investigating non-public cases, an organization said to have close ties to the four great ducal houses. One, in his mind, is secretly calculating that eliminating the arranged marriage is his father's plan. The actions of other dukes could be tasks from the spy organization. In the original work, the Crown Prince also turned evil due to his origin, and by watching himself, this can be thought of. She was suddenly hugged by a man. A firm hand securely holds the book's colleague, almost knocking him out of his sanity. Fortunately, the Duke points to the tree in front of her, explaining his concern. So she was able to convince herself that the Duke is doing this to eliminate her own surveillance. And by the way, he has also decided to clear the bad woman's name. Soon, the two arrived at an even more sumptuous and elegant beauty salon. While choosing products, he is also evaluating whether this store meets his collaboration requirements. This is Duke Pudding's expression. Cold. The maids are very beautiful, even without makeup. The sweet words maid Given feel uneasy. However, Given quickly made adjustments, thinking that the Duke was subtly reminding him that he didn't like luxury items recently. Fortunately, Jivan also discovered that the products in this store are really too luxurious, so she proposed going to other stores to see. The two had barely entered the store when the young lady in the store politely greeted them both. It was very unexpected. The other person did not look down on her despite the bad woman's fame, and furthermore, she can still accurately remember his and the Duke's names. Soon, a pleasant aroma filled the store, which was refreshing and pleasing. She supposed that these cosmetics contained a variety of herbs. Then she raised one to ask about the ingredients. The other person confidently explained the origin of the aroma and introduced her store. They are all functional cosmetics. The ability to process herbs is exceptional. While speaking, she applied some to Given's hand. She felt that unique aroma. Given believes that here she will be able to create the rhodiola cosmetics he has in mind. Suddenly, she turned her gaze towards the Duke, who is idly standing to the side. Their gazes met. The Duke looked suspicious, wondering what she wanted. However, at that moment he was brainstorming. She thought that, although the Duke was watching her, the blame should fall on the Crown Prince who gave the order, so she signaled the Duke to come closer. The other immediately stopped what he was doing and walked towards her obediently, like a puppy in the morning. She ordered the Duke to open his hands, and then applied hand cream to them with his own hands. While doing so, she also reflected internally, what beautiful hands he has. If someone will really be able to grow old together with such a man in the future, surely I have to throw a bomb at him. And the Duke, after applying hand cream, stood motionless in the same place. One realized his irrationality and nervously explained that she wanted to reciprocate the gift she had received last time. While running outside, she indeed gave someone who practices every day the swordsman-sent hand cream. I really am very foolish. In a moment of haste, the Duke expressed that practicing swordsmanship every day requires good protective care. This made someone stop in their attempt to escape. However, the fact that the two had a date became known in the royal court, at the palace illustration meeting, and by chance was overheard by the passing Crown Prince. The Crown Prince, who was a bit old-fashioned, immediately became nervous and began to think about the purpose and reason for the two's date. Finally, the narcissist convinced himself in his mind that all of this was the maids trying to make him jealous, not knowing that in his heart that notorious and evil woman of the past has been gaining more and more power, and the fact that the Crown Prince left the princess alone and left has also made the princess hate him more. He clearly remembers the past, but the Crown Prince doesn't even want to look at that maid. However, from the Crown Prince's actions and expressions, he can clearly feel jealousy. The princess, with blood-stained hands, picks up a flower and looks at it without compassion, withering in her hand. Just at that moment, the princess unexpectedly encounters the young Duke of the Ascent family in the courtyard. This is from the past. In the war, he was the only person who witnessed her healing magic and then distanced himself from her. So she decided to take advantage of this person to win back the prince's heart. Upon returning home, the Duke asked his assistant about how to please a girl, but the assistant first informed him about the investigation the Duke had commissioned regarding the maids. The result is that the maid has no attachments. Hearing this, the Duke felt as if he had fallen into an icy well. He didn't know how to express his feelings to a girl who doesn't need money, nor does she need luxuries. The assistant advised the Duke to give up, because if the maid says she doesn't want anything, it means she is subtly rejecting. Bluntly put, it's a rejection of the Duke. "My lord, you've been kicked, but they've brought you a gift." The officer immediately changed his expression. "The maids have built a high wall for you, but they've still left you a gap. Without a doubt, she's a true evil woman." Hearing the officer speak ill of his beloved, the Duke ominously warned the officer, "Don't speak lightly of the maids." Then the officer changed his way of speaking. Perhaps the maid was just feeding the Duke's idea. The Duke was confused. The officer explained that it was a very popular expression in the capital, meaning that even if there is no intention to develop the relationship further, they still frequently meet with people they like. However, Duke Vinian was not angry at all. On the contrary, he searched his memory for the various fragments of the date with the maid. Then, in an indifferent tone, he said that it didn't matter if it was a fish pond. He felt that now Jivan's heart, wounded by the trash Crown Prince, had already completely closed its emotional door. So he solemnly asked the officer to take him to the third prince. The economy changes the situation. In fact, The Duke, who had just received a gift, still had a satisfied smile. From time to time, he sniffed the fragrance of the hand cream. Hearing the maid say that the rose scent suited him very well, the Duke was even happier and couldn't stop smiling. Looking at the maid beside him, who was shining with a radiant smile, the Duke was about to make an invitation, when her brother suddenly appeared and interrupted him. Her brother, with an alert expression, reminded her that the news of his date with the Duke had already spread throughout the palace. Then he turned and stared at the Duke, and only after 5 minutes did he proceed with the process of bowing to the Duke. The Duke, who doesn't understand the truth, enthusiastically greets his brother-in-law, shakes his hand, and praises that they look very alike, and that he is even more handsome than he was said to be. The brother, who comes on strong immediately, feels less threatened by this unexpected praise. She cannot help but admire the Duke's charm. He can attract both men and women. But when the brother hears that the Duke wants to invite him to dinner with one book, he becomes cautious again and then immediately rejects the Duke's kindness. He explains to the Duke that his sister has already made a decision. Her heart must start a new life. Don't act rashly out of curiosity. She has already said she will not fall in love again. She should focus on improving herself. It's something he doesn't want to admit. After all, he isn't really dating the Duke, but seeing the Duke so clumsy and adorable, he feels embarrassed and cannot speak. So the brother decided to take his sister away. After returning home, Joan complained that she wasn't on a date. The brother didn't believe her at all. Clearly, he saw the two talking sweetly together. Joan said that the brother had also been captivated by the Duke. He couldn't say a word and even showed an expression of excitement. It turns out that the reason why the brother stops the Duke and their selves falling in love is the Crown Prince. He can't bear to see his sister, who is obsessed with love, go through another disappointment. Just thinking about how the Crown Prince behaved at that time makes him angry. If it weren't for the other person's identity, he would have already sent him on his way. At that moment, the brother suddenly remembered that he had used a magical artifact to record strange footprints in the palace courtyard. He got dressed and prepared to confirm, not knowing that a huge monster had appeared behind him just now. The brother was just about to check the information recorded on the bracelet when he was unexpectedly attacked by the huge monster. While dodging the attack, the bracelet rolled to the door of the room. Afterwards, the brother began to recite a spell, applying a defense spell to himself, hoping to hold out until rescue from others arrived. This magical creature was supposed to have used its power to cut the connection between here and the outside, and furthermore, the magical creature is very powerful. The defense spell couldn't last long. At that moment, it seemed he had heard something. After asking the maid, the other person claimed that she hadn't heard anything, when one thought it was a hallucination. Suddenly, a loud sound reached his ears, so she prepared to look for the origin of the sound, and ended up finding the door to his brother's room. She approached the door to see what his brother was doing. Suddenly, the atmosphere ordered the maid to go and call someone because he was very sure that he had heard the scream of a monster and the sound of a spell. When she opened the door, the situation in the room surprised him. Seeing that one had arrived, one asked him to use attack magic to help, but she didn't know that he couldn't use magic at all. At that moment, the monster spat poison towards him, but she was not injured. It turns out that her brother had cast a defense spell on him, blocking the attack. However, in the next instant, her brother's defense was broken by the monster. She knows that it is because she took her brother's magic that caused the defense to break. She wants to help her brother, but her body trembles without obeying. Meanwhile, his brother continues to fight the monsters. Always, she has been an excellent mage in her heart. Perhaps it was because it was the first time he saw a monster that made his body become rigid, but alone with her brother, she couldn't eliminate the monster. So she shouted at him to cheer up, but this moment of distraction was taken advantage of by the monster. He was hit by the monster's paralyzing poison and couldn't move. Soon he was firmly grasped by the monster. Perhaps this is where everything will end for him. But anyway, he wanted to try to make one escape. At this crucial moment, one noticed the bracelet beside him, so she used his power to hit the monster. The bracelet directly hit the monster's head. One wanted his brother to take the opportunity to escape. As a result, the monster was knocked down by this blow. Its entire body fell to the ground. Afterwards, under the call of the little maid, Joan Bean, she arrived late, and at the same time as the monster fell, the princess, who was manipulating the monster from afar, was also injured. Blood flowed from her nose. because the end of the contract with the monster would shorten her life. She couldn't believe that with just the bracelet, she could kill her monster. The last time, the one who summoned a shadow was defeated, and that was it. This time, the one who attacked Baden was a real high-level monster. She couldn't help but feel chills. She had clearly severed the connection with black magic. So why could the court ladies appear in time, as if they knew her plan beforehand? But she stubbornly didn't give up, feeling that this was just a coincidence. Just a coincidence. This time, the price he paid was really too high, so she prepared to test it herself. Whether the court ladies really knew something. The father on the other side encountered the monster that attacked his daughter and son. Still, he didn't dare to believe that something like this could appear in his house. Her brother's claim was that it suddenly appeared after taking a shower. Perhaps it entered his room through the window. But she says that at that time, the window was tightly closed. Could it be that this monster returned home with him from the battlefield? But his father believes it's not possible for this to happen, because these monsters are all created by dark mages who make pacts at the cost of their lives. A close bond forms between them, and they cannot be too far apart. This also means that the dark mage is in the capital. Upon hearing this news, a feeling of nervousness overwhelmed his life. It is constantly threatened. Suspects that the magical shadow that attacked him before was also the work of the dark mage. Thinking that her father is the master of the magic tower, he should have some knowledge about dark mages. She wondered if she should ask. Suddenly, he thought of a book about the plot, which eventually turns into a dark mage. She couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. Perhaps his true identity, becoming a dark mage, wasn't by his own will. This made her feel a little frustrated. I thought that as long as I wasn't a villainess, I wouldn't turn dark. At that moment, his father asked how the monster had been exterminated. Her brother took out a transformable bracelet and explained that with this, he defeated the monster with one blow. Dad, with an incredulous expression, asked the brother, "Is that true?" Upon learning that it was true, he asked why he didn't use magic. She, not knowing how to answer, wondered if he should take this opportunity to confess. The best outcome would be that his father would immediately go and buy a 20 billion model for himself. The worst outcome is that his brother and father would despise him for this. Thinking that he didn't have enough confidence in his heart, he decided not to do it. And at that moment, the brother took responsibility, saying that he was caught by a monster. If he used magic in that situation, he might hurt him. But she didn't understand. Before that, she had many opportunities to release magic. Did the brother know that she couldn't use her magic power, so he was protecting her? Afterwards, the brother smiled at Jivan with a kite-like smile and confirmed that he was indeed protecting himself. This made Jivan feel a little moved. It turns out that the brother has always been very good to him. After hearing his brother's words, the father believes that Jivan solved the problem with brute force, because this strange case is clearly inherited from his mother. Jivan's mother is a knight of great beauty. Once in the royal family, she captured a grizzly bear by hand in a house competition, and won her father's favor. Listening to the peculiar love experiences of his parents left him and his brother speechless. The father coughed awkwardly, indicating that he would investigate the matter later. At that moment, the brother proposed, "There's one important thing, and it's Duke Al's. He's been loitering around here and often bothers her." Even rumors that they are going out have spread throughout the palace and the academy. Because Duke Al's is actually a central air conditioner, she is very worried that he will deceive her. She is full of doubts because of what her brother has done to her. She wants to explain that she and the Duke are completely innocent, but her father has already given the order, strictly forbidding any relationship between the Duke and her. If he still tries to flirt with her, she won't let him escape. At that moment, a servant reports from the door. They say there is a visitor for the court lady. This news made her brother and father pleased. Context: it is the first time someone has visited the house, as far back as I can remember. At this moment, the princess holds a gift box, standing at the door of Fudin. While drinking tea, she observes carefully. It is said that the protagonist is as adorable as the sunlight in spring. Just seeing her makes one feel warmth. At the same time, she also has the ability to calm monsters. Now such a magical character appears before one, but she doesn't remember such a plot in the original. Both remain silent for a good while. Finally, the protagonist put down her cup and addressed the main topic. "I'm sorry for appearing suddenly. I also thank the maid for receiving me so enthusiastically. Actually, I thought the lady wouldn't want to see me. I know you don't like me." The protagonist begins with an air of green tea, leaving Jivan speechless. But in order for her to stop being hostile, Jivan admitted that she didn't like the princess in the past, but now there are no more reasons to hate. However, the protagonist's eyes suddenly fill with tears, as if she doesn't understand what is being said. She asks the meaning of those words. Is it that you are very confident in obtaining the crown prince's letter? This leaves one completely confused. In reality, the protagonist is not really foolish or naive. She has three purposes in coming this time. The first is to confirm how much the maid knows about her. The second is to destroy the bracelet of her debut in Baden. The third is to ensure that the maid cannot hinder her anymore. And what she says on purpose are nonsensical things, so as not to arouse suspicion about her. So she immediately mentions the maid again, about the engagement with Duke Als. Then she pretended to be sad. She thought the court ladies were trying to forget the prince. The prince thought it was because the court lady approved of my relationship with his highness. To this, she calmly replied, "In fact, I have no feelings for the prince." "Then why did you intentionally make it so obvious in front of the palace?" The lady-in-waiting especially chose an area near the palace to meet with the duke so that the news would spread instantly. I've heard that this is a common method in society to generate rumors with influential people and attract the attention of others. Court lady, do you believe that to gain the crown prince's attention, you have used the naive Duke Als? The protagonist's words are actually just to achieve her goal, a smokescreen, but that has complicated the whole situation. At the same time, it also made her father, who was hiding and listening, angry. Fortunately, her brother stopped him and prevented him from going in to tear the girl apart. Her brother advised Dad to calm down, because if he intervened in this, it would make the situation even more awkward. But Dad really couldn't swallow this humiliation. He asked if there was any news about the prince's matter that he had looked into some time ago. The third prince, on the other side, has already received letters from his father and Duke Als, but he didn't hesitate to burn all the letters. He is unwilling to have any more contact with these two dukes because he wants to protect the peaceful life of him and his mother. 18 years ago, the Empress of the Empire lost her two sons. Without an heir, she adopted the fourth prince, Adrian, as her adopted son, and named him Crown Prince. But according to the order of birth, it should be the third prince who inherited. Even the ministers commented on why the Empress would give up her talented, excellent third prince and choose the ordinary fourth prince as heir. So the ministers presented themselves before the emperor. Afterwards, the third prince was summoned by the emperor regarding this matter, but the emperor, claiming that the third prince looked haggard, asked him to go to the doctor to get medicine. The doctor at that time told the third prince not to tell anyone. The young third prince immediately understood what kind of medicine it was. He was very scared, but he had no choice. However, after drinking the medicine, nothing happened. The bottle only contained ordinary water, and his mother suddenly vomited blood and fainted. Although he managed to save her life, his mother also suffered a setback in her intelligence due to the side effects of the poison. So the third prince of now does not want to continue fighting for any rights of inheritance, not only because his life was the result of his mother's sacrifice. It is written that the emperor and empress of the empire are the same person. He definitely cannot challenge the emperor again. Recently, his father was challenged by the third prince, who refuses to meet, claiming health problems. The father is very angry. He believes that the third prince also knows that a weak person cannot protect the current peace. He sneers in his heart at the third prince's naivete. Just at that moment, he encounters Duke Urs, who has been waiting. Urs apologizes, saying that he was the one who blocked the way. Once the father accepts the apology, Duke Al intentionally emphasized the other's identity. "Isn't it Lord Mata? It's been so long since I've seen you." However, the father did not recognize the man in front of him, so Al introduced himself to the other. "My name is Ledney Al." Then, under his father's surprised gaze, he gave a polite bow. His father awkwardly praised Al's for having grown up and become a handsome young man, like the current duke. Al's, for his part, thanked his father. "Lord Mufasa, you are still the same as when I saw you as a child. You haven't aged at all." But this exceptional appearance and his excellent eloquence made the father unable to help but become alert. He suddenly regretted letting his beloved daughter meet such an eloquent man. At that moment, Owls made his purpose clear. He wanted to search the magic tower for any suitable spells for beginners. But upon hearing this, the father was filled with doubt. He had already heard of Duke Owls. He has already achieved extraordinary things in swordsmanship. So why should he learn magic? And that is precisely the trap that Owls has laid. He mentioned that on his trip to the capital, he has seen many useful and convenient magical tools. While marveling at the amazingness of mages, he also explained that learning magic can heal wounds and that it can play an important role on the battlefield. As the head of the Alès family, the one who protects the North, he should be the first to make a change. In his words, he occasionally emphasizes his yearning for magic, which gradually reduces his father's vigilance towards Aels. He couldn't imagine that a family obsessed with visions would have such a well-thought-out strategy. Then Al sincerely apologized to his father. Master Moda has always helped our family a lot. His father has always done what he should. In his heart, he has already unknowingly accepted this humble descendant. Next, Duke Alcy began to praise the maids unreservedly. The maid of the Ascent family is also an exceptionally beautiful young lady, just like the Lord of the Magic Tower. Hearing his daughter praised by a stranger, the father stopped being alert towards Duke Alcy. He thought that he really had a great eye for seeing. However, in the next moment, Aels showed a sharp look and mentioned the matter of the Crown Prince abandoning the maid. To say that such an excellent maid feels sad is simply barbaric. As expected, the father immediately agreed that the prince is a scoundrel. He whispered something to Duke Aels, saying that the Crown Prince's character is very flawed. Since he became a war hero and returned triumphantly, he has become very arrogant. The two talked animatedly for a good while. The words that the father had kept in his heart for so long all came out at once. What he couldn't express brought him relief, but he still felt it wasn't enough. He invited Duke Alza to have dinner at his house that night. After bidding each other farewell, Alza clenched his fists tightly. He is eager for tonight's dinner. Meanwhile, the princess continues to interrogate Jivan. The princess asks Jivan to answer the questions sincerely. At that moment, Jivan imagines that if it were live, she would probably have already jumped, but from her perspective, she is definitely an outsider. So Jivan simply asks the princess very calmly, "Is that why you are asking me such boring questions? The princess came to visit us very early. I thought it was something important." A serene and calm response surprised the princess. She couldn't help but imagine the maid as an extremely dangerous enemy, but she still made one last effort. She stood up excitedly and questioned the maid. "Do you think this behavior is unintentional? You are someone who, to get the Crown Prince, doesn't hesitate to use any means. Not only the Crown Prince, even Duke IRS will be embarrassed by your actions. Yes, if the court lady doesn't want to continue harming the people, she had better manage these things well." The princess's purpose in provoking Jivan is to anger her, because she wants Jivan to lose control, like before, and destroy everything she dislikes, so that she can take advantage of the murder of the Crown Prince's lover. The charge against the Princess of the Kingdom of Malaysia will arrest her. At that moment, someone reached out to the princess. The princess thought someone had taken the bait, but she was just using a fork to poke the food in front of her. While eating, one answered the princess's questions. "I didn't expect such a rumor to spread. Although it's a pity, it seems to have nothing to do with me. Besides, doesn't Her Highness the Crown Prince already have a charming partner? No matter what she does, she shouldn't notice her. If any problem really arises, it should be the princess who speaks directly to the Crown Prince. She shouldn't make an outsider like me feel so exhausted." Princess Gwenyan couldn't help but blush, Saugi shouted. At that moment, the brother entered and warned the princess to stop. "If I hear you insult my sister again, I won't let you escape." The princess stared at Baden. Clearly not long ago, she didn't recognize this maid as her sister. Now he acts like an older brother. "But it's time for me to leave." So she apologized to the maid. "I couldn't control my emotions. I said many things I shouldn't have." Then she gave him a book. "This is a gift I received from the Crown Prince." The older brother impatiently asked him to clarify. The princess suddenly filled with tears and said that this gift was actually a present that the Crown Prince had prepared for a maid. She also found out by reading the letter that came with it. She didn't want to make up for her mistake today with this gift. She only hoped that the maid would know that she had no bad intentions. Having said this, the princess left directly. And after confirming that the green tea girl had really left, the brother asked Jivan incredulously, "How is it that you let this type go without any trouble?" Jivan smiled upon hearing that. He already knew that his brother was spying at the door. If he had really done anything out of the ordinary, he feared that his brother wouldn't be able to bear it. Although she said that, in reality, she is very grateful that her brother appeared to help her pick up the pieces, because at that moment what the princess said made him quite angry. If it had been in his original voice, the other person probably wouldn't get out of bed for the rest of their life. At that moment, his brother suggested throwing away that gift, but she rejected her brother's good intention because she was very curious about what was inside that could make the princess angry. Not long ago, the princess left the house, very sadly, but in reality, she had already made her history demon find the location of the bracelet. However, to avoid causing trouble, the princess didn't make Chimo destroy the bracelet immediately. She only asked him to continue observing to find an opportunity to destroy it. After solving the bracelet problem, the only problem left for the princess was one book. Although she had always heard rumors about the change in the maids, she and the Crown Prince never believed that people could be so simple, just by changing. But after seeing the maid today, the truth is that he is not the evil one she knew, even pretending that that gift was sent by the Crown Prince. One also showed no hesitation. The gift that the princess sent this time is to please those foolish nobles. The bath gel specifically designed can make the skin glow and is called by the nobles the spring of the sun. But if used frequently, it can cause ugly skin diseases. And at that moment, she can appear as the Redeemer, providing them with free healing, treatment for skin diseases. This is how the nobles praise themselves. Originally, she planned to tame the maids in the same way, but now the maids' behavior makes her doubt whether they will use the bath gel. Just when the princess was desperate, Chimo asked the princess if the other person didn't want to help. Because at the moment the princess was preparing to leave, he silently observed one book and discovered that the other person was enveloped in a dense atmosphere of black magic. She thought the princess wanted to attract the other person. These words made the princess suddenly understand. It turns out that the maid, just like her, is also a dark sorceress. Only in this way can it be explained how she could discover her plans so easily. And the princess also quickly thought about how to deal with the maid. She was going to report this to the royal family to become the prince's consort. Even if the other is of her own kind, she will show no compassion. At that moment, one book opens the gift left by the princess. Inside is a letter written with the crown prince's forged note. Looking at the new book feels strange. Moreover, the crown prince, a real idiot, is praying to her. It's understandable that the princess came to demand an explanation, so she decides to throw away this expensive bath gel that looks very costly. At that moment, the maid entered and told Jivan that the cosmetic store had recently agreed to collaborate on the production of Rhodiola Crush. Now she only needs to decide what kind of product she wants to make. Suddenly, Jivan looked at the bath gel in her hand. I heard that this bath gel is very popular among the nobility, and also in summer, the demand for bath gel will also increase. It's an excellent opportunity to conquer the market. So Given immediately decided that she wanted to produce bath gel. The maid at that moment noticed the bath gel in Given's hands. Your Highness, aren't you holding Sunspring water? This is rumored to make skin as smooth as silk. In an instant, it's now very difficult to obtain, even with payment. She immediately became excited and asked how much that was worth. The maid thought for a moment and guessed. Now a bottle costs 10 million energy. Upon learning that the bath gel in her hands was more valuable than gold, she immediately discarded the idea of throwing it away, carefully put it back in the box, and thought about finding an opportunity to sell it. The maid asked if it was a gift from Duke IRS. She immediately stopped her action. The image of when she was in the makeup store applying hand cream to the Duke came to her mind. Thinking about the Duke and his behavior, it seemed indeed that they were on a date, but she still said that he had no relationship with the Duke. The young maid was evidently unlucky. If it were me, I would definitely give a gift every day. After all, there is no reason not to fall in love with such a perfect person. Given felt incredibly good from the maid's flattering words. However, she suddenly saw that the maid's earrings were shining with a dazzling red. There is no time to think. A maid reached out and took off the bright earring, then ran desperately towards the window. In the instant she threw the earring, he had already calculated that at that moment there would be no one in the courtyard, but she had overlooked one variable. When the earrings fell directly onto Duke Arles, Given's mind went completely blank. Not knowing what to do, immediately, a loud explosion transmitted from the courtyard to the room. The dense smoke that followed the explosion made Given cough non-stop, but she quickly remembered the moment she threw the bomb. The Duke is right downstairs. Hurriedly running to the window, exchanging the Duke's name, and immediately the Duke is seen raising his sword, standing unharmed in his place. It seems he used his swordsmanship to withstand the damage of this explosion. It's a relief that the Duke wasn't injured. However, in the next moment, she saw the Duke staring fixedly at her. It was then that she remembered he was royalty, a secret inspector. Perhaps having no problems was the biggest problem. She took 2 steps back with difficulty, wondering if she should say she didn't do it on purpose, if he would forgive her. "Are you all right, madam?" Hearing the maid's voice, she quickly came to confirm her health, then asked her to go and rest first. She herself went out to see the situation because Duke Als had been affected by the explosion. Binyan's maid immediately became nervous, but she asked her to calm down. "I myself am the one who throws the bombs. I'll go and come back, don't worry." However, once she closed the door of the room, she quickly ran to the courtyard, thinking about what to do, repeating 300 times, "Normally I get into minor trouble, but it's okay. This time I threw a bomb in front of the prosecutor." She had barely gone down the stairs when she realized that the entrance was already surrounded by a lot of curious people. They were all around, and Given suddenly fell to the ground. This time things really got serious. When Given reached the courtyard, everyone immediately gave space to the little Given. They didn't expect that. Always about the maids who don't care about the home. She would appear here. Taking advantage of this time, she observed the courtyard a bit and realized that it wasn't as messy as she imagined. She felt somewhat relieved. In the next moment, a blonde-haired guard came out to explain this explosion incident occurred right during Duke Arles's visit. Thanks to him absorbing the energy generated by the explosion, the loss was minimized, saying that one can rest assured that he will definitely catch the criminal, not knowing that the author of this explosive incident is oneself. While making the yellow-haired knight step aside, she pushed him with her elbow. The powerful force made the blonde's soul leave his body. At that moment, Duke Als, surrounded by the curious crowd, noticed someone approaching him. So with a bouquet of mousses flowers in his hands, he greeted her enthusiastically. She didn't expect the Duke to call her directly. She hasn't even thought of a justification yet. She suddenly became scared and started to sweat cold because, under her own perception, the Duke was smiling at her strangely. The curious onlookers, seeing this scene, commented that the Duchess and the Duke made a good couple. Given, clearly the Duke was looking at him furiously. "Where is the compatibility, you half-pan face?" She awkwardly asked the Duke if he was injured. "I'm fine, but at that moment I didn't anticipate it at all, so I unintentionally destroyed the rose I was going to send with the rice." A little surprised as to why one would send flowers, thinking that perhaps the Duke has a habit of not showing up empty-handed as his dating partner, he should accept since it is polite. So she took the flowers from the Duke's hand. "You say these flowers are for me, then I'll take them. Just what I need to decorate the room." The Duke heard that she wanted to decorate the room. Lima says he will go buy some flowers. Given hurriedly refuses, asking the reason for the visit. Hearing that he was invited by his father for dinner, she looks at the bright sun in the sky. Given is stunned and can only laugh nervously. The Duke has arrived very early. At that moment, the captain of the guard approached the two, bowed, and asked the maid if there were any clues about the explosion that occurred in her house. She had already asked Duke Els. He said he knew nothing, and furthermore, no conclusive evidence was found at the scene. It is surprising that the Duke did not expose one. The Duke simply shrugged, then adopted an attitude of having done a good deed and wanting praise. Unfortunately, one couldn't understand him at all, so the Duke asked the captain of the guard to investigate the others first. Then the Duke hoped that one would lead him to the reception room. She immediately became nervous, thinking that the Duke wanted to extort him. Although he was very grateful to the Duke for not making him look like a troublemaker in front of everyone, he was still very worried about what would happen next. Afterwards, she led the Duke to her private reception room, thinking that no matter what, he would resolve it with the Duke. But the Duke went straight to the window and commented that the repercussions of this explosion were not small. He asked if Ivan had been injured. At that moment, Ivan just realized that he was right in the position of the window. However, he had not suffered any damage. He even told the Duke that she was fine and thanked him for covering the explosion just now. "Actually, it was my mistake, my apologies, Duke. It was a mistake. I thought the other wouldn't, given that explains my artifacts in detail had a problem. In a moment of panic, I threw it outside, just when the Duke was passing by. Does that mean you discovered that the bomb you made was going to explode? That's why you threw it outside then? Why didn't you use defensive magic? A nervous heart stopped beating. No wonder you're the royal inspector, so sharp that you caught your own mistake. At that moment, Jiven found himself completely trapped in a difficult situation, not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, the Duke was approaching him step by step, just as she was about to confess that she didn't know magic. The Duke asked Jiven, "Did you throw the bomb at me intentionally?" She really wanted to be honest about her magical memory loss, but that would spread her weaknesses. The enemies she attracted before would also arrive immediately, but if they do nothing, it's as if they accept the fact that the Duke has been harmed. At that moment, perhaps her father and brother would distance themselves from her, again for exposing her true nature. So, in an instant, she finds herself in a difficult situation. After 3 breaths, she decided to confess her symptoms. However, before he could say it, the Duke saw him with an expression of difficulty, and was the first to express his opinion. "You do this to test me?" She was full of doubts, suspecting that the Duke was confused by her. It turns out that the Duke, upon learning that his interest in one book was not just curiosity, decided to be the most special fish in one pond because she had never left her territory and knew very little about the book's past. So to compensate for the fact that he and Given had not shared moments together, the Duke began a frantic search for information about Given. However, the more he learned about Given, the more he could feel the unrestrained love that Given hid for the Crown Prince. But the Duke believed deep down that the Crown Prince was not his equal. He just lacked an opportunity to prove it. So when the Duke saw the red glow of the mason, he felt no fear, only joy and a little nervousness. He thought that this was a test that life was giving him. After all, the Crown Prince and he are both masters of swordsmanship, and in the past, the Crown Prince helped Cordelia resist the bombs from one book, so as an aspirant to Given, he should also possess this ability. So the Duke assured her that no matter the reason, he would not blame the court lady. Seeing the Duke in a masochistic attitude, one book invites the Duke to sit down and chat to clarify the misunderstanding. Then, Given asks the Duke what the experiment he mentioned earlier means. The Duke simply swirls his wine glass calmly and glances at the accessories beside him. "Isn't it the lady-in-waiting who wants to confirm my strength?" Then he smiled and asked Even, "The situation should be more or less like this, right?" At that moment, Even nervously looked at the Duke's sword. Her mind constantly searched for what the Duke meant by the situation. Perhaps the Duke was referring to the incident where he threw a bomb at Cordelia. The Crown Prince then protected Cordelia, but what does that have to do with the experiment? Suddenly, I thought that the Duke had perhaps already guessed that I am the royal investigator, so he assumed that I was deliberately trying to create a situation equal to the one then, to test if he is the Crown Prince's secret inspector. And the Duke's calmness just now is actually silent pressure on himself. The goal is to tell Jiven that no matter what, he will not be able to escape his surveillance. Jiven's face becomes increasingly gloomy. Then she sincerely apologizes to the Duke. "I was really testing the Duke, but now I really feel very bad. I beg the Duke to forgive me." Saying this, he pleads with the Duke, "Please don't tell that person about this." However, the Duke suddenly asked seriously, "Who are you referring to?" When he heard the name of the Crown Prince, the Duke dropped the glass he was holding in his hand. "I don't understand why you mentioned the prince here." She subconsciously assumes that the investigator will inform the prince about the fault and what he is testing and making demands for. He is really too arrogant, so she apologizes to the Duke and asks him not to take it to heart. At that moment, the Duke stood up and then sat down next to Given. With a thud, he solemnly promised, Given that he would not tell anyone about this, and handed over what he had in his hand. Given, until today, what he received from the Duke was definitely the earring bomb he had lost recently. She didn't expect the Duke to put aside his duty as an investigator for her. She quickly asked why. The Duke only said that it pained him greatly to see the maid. And besides, this was something that concerned only the two of them. It was not necessary to tell anyone else. She doesn't know how, but she suddenly blushed upon hearing the Duke's words. He found it a bit difficult to distinguish whether the Duke was acting out of pure sweetness and tolerance, or if he really believed what he said. Afterwards, the Duke said that he was going to resolve something with the captain of the guard. He took out his communication device that he always carries with him, and then crushed it. He will tell the others that the explosion was caused by his communication device. She doubts. Didn't the Duke just tell the others that he knew nothing? Duke IRS can be seen leaving her peacefully with complete confidence, although before the maid it is only a cause for joy, but before others, he is the head of the Owl's family. Seeing that the Duke is making up lies for her, Given's heart beats strongly, as if the Duke really is only special to her. However, in the next moment, the Duke intimately asks one book. Can you promise me a favor? Not long ago, my brother learned of a terrifying bomb attack at home. He then asked the head of the guard about what happened. According to the head of the guard's description, it was a malfunction of a magical artifact carried by Duke Els that caused the explosion. Binyan's brother sighed in relief and asked about the Duke's safety and presence at this time, but he didn't realize that the captain of the guard was saying this while soaked in sweat. The captain of the guard told the brother that at this moment, the Duke and Miss Zend are strolling in the small forest. The brother instantly lost his composure. He doesn't want his sister to be led astray by love again and lose her mind. Clearly, she is already on 3 principles and should not approach the Duke. Moreover, his father invited him to dinner. Everyone ignores what they have said. Meanwhile, the Duke is seeking acknowledgments. He has already ordered the captain of the guard not to continue the investigation in order to return the favor and force a promise. I can accept any condition from the Duke. The Duke thought for a second, with a smile, looked at Given beside him. Given felt a little embarrassed. If it's about borrowing money, I don't have any. But the Duke won't waste this rare opportunity on such trivial matters. She only saw him ambiguously stroke a lock of her hair. I hope the maid will call herself LED. That's the Duke's nickname. He wishes that his relationship with her from now on will not always be so changeable. And at this moment, because of the Duke's physical contact, whether intentional or not, it made her blush and her heart beat faster. He discovered that little by little he no longer understood this Duke, but she still had enough confidence in her reputation as a bad woman and his unattractive appearance. He thought that what the Duke was doing was not directed at him, so he felt and accepted and immediately shouted, "Lele!" However, this sudden nickname left the Duke stunned in place. He couldn't imagine that being called by his beloved would have such great power. The Duke savored the sweet taste again and again when a shout in the distance interrupted him. She saw her brother running towards him, panting. Fortunately, there was Given that held him to the side so that he wouldn't fall, but when the brother could catch his breath, he immediately let Given go first. He wanted to speak alone with Duke Els. The book was worried that a battlefield would form between his brother and the Duke, and didn't want to leave. However, what he didn't expect was that Duke Els also wanted to speak alone with his brother. Unfortunately, Given can only return home first. After Given leaves, his brother warns the Duke loudly, "Don't approach my own sister." The Duke simply listens silently, then shows his charming characteristic smile. I understand why the little Duke would say that about himself. He doesn't seem to be hurt at all. Please be at ease. For a moment, the brother was captivated by the Duke's charm. He felt that what the Duke said was very sincere and had persuasive power. Before he could react, the Duke immediately approached him and firmly grabbed his shoulders. I've heard that the little Duke's theoretical knowledge of magic is very profound. He is very good at teaching. It turns out that the Duke, in order to be with such a worthy person, investigated his brother's and father's information early on. He knew how to win the favor of both. At the subsequent dinner, Duke Els and his brother and father chatted animatedly, leading Given to speculate what kind of potion the Duke had used on them. The Duke spoke with great eloquence at the table. Given felt the distance between them was like that of a universe. At that moment, Given suddenly heard a murmur of discussion. The maids outside were surprised by the Duke, as if he were a son-in-law coming to ask for a hand in marriage. Madness, they thought. If he were really her partner, he should be worried about her all the time and not just be drinking and chatting with her parents and brother. Thinking of this, In felt a little sad. She only remembers having just changed her clothes when he arrived in the dining room. Duke Els stood up and praised that her clothes suited her well, but after that, there was no more communication. Clearly, he had recently asked her to call him by his nickname. Afterwards, both the brother and the father were already completely drunk, which made Given uncomfortable and expressionless, because these two people had only drunk half a glass. She couldn't stand two drunks talking nonsense beside him, so she stood up and said goodbye. After leaving the restaurant, Given went to the courtyard to pass the time. She didn't quite understand how he felt at that moment either. Just then, a person appeared behind Given, A nervous Given turned around and discovered that the other person was his maid. She was a girl very close to her. She asked what was wrong. However, the maid approached him, claiming that she had something to ask the lady. Seeing the maid trembling, she knew that the maid was very scared. She still wants to ask him. Then she saw the maid kneel down, begging him to sell her some of the sun water because her sister had a serious skin disease. Only the sun water could cure this disease. I recently heard that the court lady received a bottle. If the court lady doesn't need it, just ask, and I will sell myself to you. I will repay you with my whole life. However, In was surprised to hear this. He didn't expect the water from the sun spring to have such an effect, so how could he compete with it? So she told the maid in front of her that she would not sell her the water from the sun spring. Dinian knew that her request had gone too far. She could only keep apologizing to Given. But Given's next sentence gave her hope. She saw Given gently dry the tears from the corner of the maid's eye. I am very interested in your sister's story. Bring her before me so I can see her. The maid anxiously asked Given, what is the purpose of bringing my sister? She asked the other person's last name. It's Rodney. A noble heard that 10 years ago, the 2 daughters of the Rodney family were kicked out of the house. They were finally inherited by Pansy's cousin. Are you referring to you 2 sisters? The old-fashioned maid seemed to recall a painful past. Recognize, she and her sister are the Daisy of the Rodney family. They now live in the suburbs with their mother. Your sister takes the course of heiress of the Rodney family. Her mind must be very clear. The reason I looked for her is because I need to ask her for something. Of course, I will also offer a reward. If you accept these conditions, I will provide you with the water from the sun spring. The maid looked at Given in surprise. She also didn't expect that the noble of the palace would be so compassionate. Then Given squatted down and extended her hand to help the maid who was on the ground. The specific details of the cooperation must be discussed personally with your sister. The maid gently placed her hand on Given's. It was as if she had grabbed a lifeline. With a firm attitude, she replied to the court lady, tomorrow morning we will go together to find my sister. The brother on the other side, the Duke's dinner, is about to come to an end. The father was taken away first by the servants, and the brother told the Duke, I will consider well what happened at that time. It turns out that recently in the forest, the Duke asked his brother to be his magic teacher. The condition was that the sister would not be hurt. The Duke asked the brother in confusion, do I seem to be that kind of person? Of course not. Anyone would say that the Duke is very handsome and a gentleman. Don't betray the title of the most handsome man in the empire, but that is also the problem. Then, under the Duke's surprised gaze, he explained the reason for the Crown Prince's blindness. In reality, these two had never had contact. It was only because the prince smiled brightly enough when apologizing after accidentally bumping into her. It's just sunlight. In short, that's what the book is like. It's easy to believe in other people's children, saying that the brother advises the Duke. If you weren't so easy to fall in love, you shouldn't leave space for Given so soon. At that moment, the brother suddenly said that Given should have no interest in the Duke, because recently, he accidentally overheard that one book was going to grind the Duke's engagement gift into powder. And at that moment, the Duke felt very hurt. His heart seemed to break completely. However, the brother opposite still didn't understand the situation, asking if the Duke had sent West to Lake Long Jin. The Duke said nothing, only drinking red wine uncontrollably, one bottle after another. Even the servant who was serving the wine had to always be by the Duke's side. After dinner, the Duke went out to the courtyard alone to clear his head. But unknowingly, his eyes began to turn red. He didn't understand why. If she clearly said she liked the bracelet he gave her very much, he now wants to turn it into powder. He feels disappointed, sitting on the ground. Could it be that the fact that she uses the nickname is only because he asked her to? Could it be that this is a way to pressure him? The Duke sniffs the aroma of a hand cream that was given to him, and each time he feels that everything is a whim on her part. Given always shows caution in front of him. Does she think he is a burden? Is that why she is always being evasive? But he only wants to be the fish in Given's pond. Early the next day, the Duke began talking to his officer about youthful love, mentioning that he wanted to learn magic. The officer thought the Duke was crazy, because using magic went against his family's policy of swordsmen, but the Duke maintained a firm attitude. Now I am the head of the Alice family. Policy should also change with the times. The lieutenant still had an expression of incomprehension. Suddenly, the Duke raised his wooden sword and lunged at the lieutenant. After the lieutenant managed to block the Duke's attack with effort, the Duke jumped back. Then, a white light flashed on the lieutenant's neck. The lieutenant was frightened and broke out in a cold sweat. The Duke smiled and explained, "That is the power of magic. Right now, I can only do this by hand. Controlling whether there are more options in the future will make a big difference." But the officer said clearly, "It's only to have more interaction with the maids. You look for excuses when before, you were unmoved by the beauty of any. Now suddenly, this makes me very doubtful. Has the Duke fallen under the maid's enchantment?" The magical Duke cannot bear these questions. The officer doesn't feel that he can't distinguish between true feelings and those falsely created by magic. The officer nervously defends himself. "It's because recently there were rumors that the maid did it to make the prince change his mind. She intentionally used the Duke again." This made the Duke unable to avoid remembering what happened last night at the doctor's house. It turns out that last night, a doctor was strolling in the courtyard, thinking that dinner should have ended early, so he quickened his pace to return to his room to rest, and on the way he suddenly encountered the Duke, who was sitting drunk by the side of the road. She was frightened, thinking it was another dark mage sent to attack his monsters, until the Duke looked up. Only then did he recognize that it was Duke Urs, so he gently called him LED Knight. But the Duke stared at her uncomfortably, which left her a little confused. The Duke quietly reminded LED suddenly. Given became a steam engine. She didn't expect the drunk Duke to be so adorable. She leaned down to ask what LED was doing there. The Duke simply stood up and then looked at LED calmly, and LED also observed the Duke, discovering that her face was flushed. This Duke, who is usually serene and calm, contrasts remarkably, making the girl unable to resist wanting to pinch his little face. At that moment, the Duke asked the question that had him drunk tonight. "Do you really like the dating gift I sent you?" Given looked a little confused, then heard the Duke explain, "Because you said you would grind it up and drink it." While one was complaining in her heart that her brother talked too much, she wanted to defend herself. Although she had indeed said it, it was actually a misunderstanding. Seeing that one admitted this, the Duke felt increasingly discouraged. With no other option, one could only comfort the Duke, saying that she really liked the gift. Saying those things only has some other reasons. Just when she wanted to look for an excuse again, she unintentionally saw the Duke with an expression of grievance and sadness. This made her feel a little guilty. Clearly, the Duke had always helped her, without prejudice, but one had made him feel so sad, so she made a decision. She must tell the other her secret. In the next moment, the Duke, with a book in hand, regained his serene and stable expression from before and told one book that someone was spying on them. Given followed the Duke's gaze, discovering that the rune was her brother's. Instinctively, she thought that her brother was again going to forbid her from going out with the Duke, so the Duke doesn't have to worry. But the Duke's gaze was full of anger, telling her that it was something unpleasant, and he must go investigate personally. But she doesn't want the Duke and her brother to feel uncomfortable. Instinctively, she grabbed the Duke's hand, then threw the Duke against the wall. With a thud, she pushed him against the pillar, not letting go, and a little nervously asked the Duke to calm down. She will send the guards to investigate. The Duke was surprised by this sudden push. With a bewildered expression, he tremblingly reached out his hand, trying to hug Jivan. But in the end, he didn't dare to make the other person uncomfortable. But he tells her that he knows, and she shows a radiant smile. Every time, he feels that tonight's Duke is especially charming. It's very obvious that he is stubborn, but he can listen to her words without batting an eye. At that moment, the book suddenly realized that she had been holding the Duke's wrist the whole time. Frightened, she hurriedly let go and apologized. "I really am too irrational." And the Duke saw that his reddened wrist made a sound. Being a master swordsman, he was surprisingly overpowered by Given. Thinking of this, he looked at Given with an enraptured expression. His beloved really is incredible. At that moment, Given worriedly asked the Duke, "Are you angry?" He doesn't know that this question is useless. Even the Duke laughs and tells Jivan to repeat it. Then the Duke asks what Jivan meant. Jivan tells the Duke that it is a level 1 secret. It cannot be told to anyone. However, the Duke hears that it is a level 1 secret. Lima nervously approached Jivan and whispered that since it is an important secret, she shouldn't say it here. Besides, it's not necessary for you to tell me. Unknowingly, his nonsensical closeness made Given's mind fill with blood. She rigidly asked the Duke what his plans were next. "Do you want to go have a cup of tea or watch the moon?" Thinking that it is very late now and it is not appropriate to do anything, she suddenly invites the Duke. Would you like to spend the night together? Yes.